Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. If we could just take our seats, we're going to kick off our second session of the day.
Okay.
If it's not clear, this session is planning tomorrow's tier supplier logistics today. So we're talking about the tier supplier chain inbound. For those of you who might have been looking for the finished vehicle session, that's next door. So welcome once again. We're very, very pleased to have you here back in Detroit. And as you know, traditionally in this conference now we sort of drill down to some different subject areas, get a chance to go in a bit more depth. And for that matter, we have a great panel of experts and practitioners involved in the tier supply chain here today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Christopher Ludwig. I'm the editor of the Automotive Logistics Group, working with Louis not quite the whole 20 years of our existence, I must admit, but long enough of it as to get a good sense. Hopefully, got a chance to meet a lot of you by now, and if not, looking forward to doing that during the next two days. Just a reminder, we're going to keep on reminding you about this, but as Louis mentioned for a session, there is no printed program anymore. It's all on the app. So we really would like you to download and use that app. There's some instructions how to do that on the screen. It really, it's obviously the schedule, it's obviously the speakers. There's lots of other things you can do on that as well. You can ask a question to the moderator on session. You can contact the delegates here. There's a way to do that via email. And it's other features as well. So do take a minute to do that. And then we're doing, at the end of every session, we're doing some quick voting on what you thought of that session, which just helps us as Automotive Logistics plan our events better and plan our programs to have your feedback. And in our last session today, so session 4, we're going to do live polling. This is something we do at all of our conferences for those of you who've been to others. We ask a series of questions on topics and trends for you to vote on in terms of things you see happening in the industry today and tomorrow. So again, that's all via the Automotive Logistics Live app. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're calling this session Planning Tomorrow's Tier Supplier Logistics Today. I think it goes without saying that tier suppliers are a vital part of the automotive industry and supply chain. I mean, if we look at the last 20 years or so, the amount of value creation in the supply chain from the tier suppliers, I think both in terms of the technology as well as the actual manufacturing, it has grown tremendously. The numbers that I see, typically 75% of the value of the car now comes from a tier supplier across the tier supply chain. I saw figures, this is in Europe, but I don't think it'll be too different in North America, from CLEPA, which is the Tier Supplier Association, that R&D spending amongst tier suppliers is now 20 billion euros a year, and that's actually more than the combined total of OEMs. There's quite a few more of them as well, so it's not the fairest comparison, but still it gives you that sense of the value. And I think with autonomous driving, with in-car connectivity, with electric vehicles, I can't see this changing, I only see it increasing. That's where a lot of the investment, of course, is coming. So that just puts in context how important the supply chain, the tier supplier supply chain is, because they obviously have the tier 2, 3s to manage inbound. And when we look at things like hurricanes, like earthquakes, like other catastrophes, the visibility for the car makers really depends on a clarity in the tier supply chain and understanding there. So there are partnerships that are necessary across, and clearly we're in a time of change, which we've talked a bit about in the first session. I think we're going to talk a lot more about it over the next 2 days in terms of digitalization, in terms of the IT visibility, in terms of optimization, and we've got a panel here today again to talk about ways in which, specifically for the tier suppliers, probably talking mainly inbound tier suppliers, that this can improve. So the way the session will be structured is we're going to have a presentation first, and that'll be from Srini, Muthusrinivasan, who is the Senior Global Industry Strategies Director from JDA Software, put us some of the digitalization trends into context for the supply chain, and then really we're going to move right into a Q&A discussion, and for that we've got great panelists here. Very pleased to welcome Jeffrey Esther is the Group Manager of Logistics Operation and Exports for Toyota Motor North America. And Jeff told me before, he's also worked in the tier supplier for a tier supplier previously as well, so he does understand this world. Jeff can give us some perspective, like I said, from the OEM side, but maybe about how that communication can work as well. Also very pleased to have Amy Broglin-Peterson, who's the manager of the Transport Management Center North America for Robert Bosch. Of course, such a massive tier supplier, and I believe Amy also has quite a bit of industry experience as well. We can connect to other parts. And a pinch hitter, as he described, maybe a change from what we were originally planning, but a great panelist nonetheless here, Carl Zimmerman, who's the Manager of Logistics Purchasing for the Americas at Magna Powertrain. So again, a great lineup there. I'm really hoping that our audience will make my job reasonably easy by coming with a lot of your questions, but I can assure you I've got pages worth of it, so we're not going to get to lunch any earlier regardless. So think about your questions. You can either say them obviously, or you can send them to me if you're shy, and I'll put them for you. But before we do the Q&A, I'm pleased to invite Srini now to give his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Morning, everyone. Appreciate the opportunity to be here and be with my fellow partners in crime for the hour to share what I perceive and believe is a pertinent topic in the automotive industry. And when I mean automotive industry, by all means, I'm representing OEMs, tier suppliers, and 3PLs. I'm titling my presentation, Concept to Cash. Please note down, not cash to cash, for a reason. And I hope through the presentation, it will reveal itself why I'm titling it this way. Now, to get there, I want to recognize two significant disruptive tipping points that we are seeing in the industry. The first one in the world of the automotive industry, as we all see it today, and the second one that is tied to enabling the automotive industry and taking it into the digital world. Show of hands, or if anyone think what the first term means, isomorphosis. You can Google it, you can find it in Merriam-Webster's dictionary. It's a term that I just coined. Any takers here, what it could mean?
The change from internal combustion to something else.
50%, 50 marks to you. Yes, you're absolutely right. And the clue was actually coming from Brandon Mason in the morning's presentation when he was giving out some stats as well. It is the transformation of internal combustion engines, which characterize and define the automobiles for ages, into what we can now call the integrated circuitry. Now, in that complex background and platform, the traditional supply chains, as we know it, the linear definitions of supply chains are long gone, and there is a clear need to adopt, adapt, embrace, enable the grid format of a supply chain, the so-called digital supply chains. And I'll get to that shortly, what it means to you. Not so long ago, a year ago, in fact, NXP Semiconductors made a presentation at an industry forum. And they were talking about the high-techization of the automotive industry. The graphic tells you a lot about a great representation of how high-tech supply chains are taking over the automotive supply chain. Now, for those of you who may not know who NXP is a Dutch-based chip manufacturing firm, $9.5 billion in revenue, and they hold the top pole position in serving the automotive OE electronic space. Coming very close to them and trying to vie for the position is Qualcomm. And more recently, I think 2 or 3 days ago, the CEO remarked, the next innovation is not going to be in the mobile world, it's going to be in the mobility world. The platform and the opportunities of innovation, it's going to be in the automotive sector. As you could see from the graphic here, be the sensors or be the intelligent components that's being provided by tier suppliers, or the very platform that make up the automobiles today, we are moving from the traditional enterprise way of looking at various companies, the automotive ecosystem, into the digital world. So I took a step back. I mean, we're all very closely associated with the automotive industry per se, but I wanted to know what the CXOs, what the CEOs of various other companies are looking at, and what is their vision in digitizing their supply chain. So I was looking at a few examples. For example, Caterpillar and Hilti, not necessarily a consumer automotive sector, but heavy equipment construction manufacturing firm. For them, the next 2 to 3 years, they're worried about consumer-driven personalization and reduction of order lead time. Now, if I go into the automotive sectors like Fiat Chrysler, GMs of the world, Renault, they're caring for personalization as well, and they're also caring for improving the mobility of what they are introducing into the market, classic mobility of your automobiles. Now, if I go down the wheel here, if I'm looking at the tier ones, whether they are the tire companies or companies like Adient who supply the seating systems to OEMs, they care for distribution reach, they care for volume attainment, they care for profitability, they care for segmentation. And I'll define segmentation very soon down the line. And if you're getting into coding companies, they're practically the same as well. They're caring for nimbleness. But one thing that stuck to me when I was reading over 20 10Ks from all these companies is all these companies cared for 3 key goals. One, customer centricity. How could they understand the consumers, the socially aware, socially inclined, socially influenced consumers of today? And how could you convert that social intelligence to social commerce, which is where you get into 2 other aspects of supply chain. Currency with a T, again another word that you're not going to find anywhere in the dictionary, because here I'm talking about the sense of urgency, the sense of time, the vector of time compression, the temporal compression that's happening in the supply chain. Everyone wants to compress the lead time, where 1 year is not anymore 365 days, a week is not 7 days, and a day is not anymore 24 hours. And the other element is the currency, which is the cash. So if data is the currency of supply chain, the currency with a T here will actually become cash in every one of your pockets. Hence, concept to cash cycle. Now, I want to take a step back. I would be preaching to the choir if I were to go and draw a typical automotive supply chain network. But to simplify a few things, I took a very rudimentary, simplified attempt to represent an end-to-end supply chain, all the way from dealers on one end to wholesalers, followed by the assembly plants and various other tier suppliers, be it powertrain, CKDs, or the other suppliers feeding into the system. And keep in mind, 3PLs are part of it here as well. Now, traditionally, automotive supply chain for over 2-3 decades have always functioned in an MTS model, make-to-stock model. Cars being built to forecast, pushed all the way down to dealers, from where the consumers go pick and convert that to cash. Over the years, past 10, 15 years, that has changed thanks to the introduction of MTOC, model, trim, options, color. Varieties came into play, and automotive companies were able to adapt from an MTS model to ATO model, which is assemble to order, where you could assemble these cars, put them, dock them at certain points from where they get distributed, wherein it allowed for some level of personalization. By no means it's personalization, some level of choices in the hands of the end consumer. Now, with the digital world, a lot has come in very differently. If you have to start looking at a pure play MTS model, that is long gone. Now, I'm no more having to rely on a push-based supply chain. I have the ability to create a hybrid model where automotive companies, tier suppliers, 3PLs can create a hybrid approach of make to stock, make to order, assemble to order, and also keep in mind, especially for 3PLs out here, that there is a huge opportunity for configured order at the very last mile or the very last 10 mile, which wasn't possible in the earlier days or in the earlier models that we've seen through. Now, this is allowing for what I would call a me factor. Every consumer would want certain level of personalization in their cars. And by cars, I mean these are not the wheels, these are not the seating systems. This is very similar to your smartphones. How is your car configured to be cognitive and connected? So car is no more an instrument of locomotion. A car or an automobile is an instrument that creates a holistic experience for you to move from point A to point B. Now, here lies the challenge, because you need to be fully aware of what the consumer wants, what the market needs, and how are you going to balance these across these markets, the product categories, and the zillion options that is now going to be available to the end consumer. Now, with these zillion options come another challenge, which is engineering feasibility. If you're all in the world of automotive OEMs, you understand the zillion Boolean logic that's out there, which is absolutely tough to fathom, and you can't optimize those code lines. So on one hand, you have the market, the sales, and the zillion configuration that is possible. On the other hand is how you balance that against the engineering feasibility, and ultimately you need to create the supply balance equations with tier 1 suppliers, assembly plant capacities, and 3PL capacities. Yet, which is possible today thanks to digital supply chain, because here you're fully aware of not just the enterprise capability, which is optimization, but you're also fully aware of what's available on the edge, the real-time information that allows you to monitor what the risks are going to be, and that's going to allow you to go and act on those risks. So you're able to sell intelligently into the market, whoever you are, whether you're OEs or whether you are 3PLs or whether you are tier suppliers, immaterial, you can fulfill the flow of goods or the flow of inventory, the flow of parts, the flow of CKDs, the flow of powertrains intelligently. And when there is a need to manufacture or assemble, you can do that intelligently as well. And the reason I'm using this word, it's not a trivialized term, a smart or intelligent here, because I'm trying to enforce a point that companies need to be responsive, but they do not have to trade off. They can still be profitable. Make sense? Now, there's a lot of content here that we can share. We have a booth out there as well. But what I want to stress upon here is 5 key takeaways for all of you out here, irrespective of the industry that you represent, is the 5 key takeaways for digitalization of supply chain is understand the me factor. The me factor is that end consumer who wants everything to be different, catering to his ego. You can't take that away from the world, like it or not. The second aspect of it is profitable segmentation, where one size is no more fitting all, one size is actually fitting none, and as a result, I need to understand what my market space is, what my product category is, and what is that I need to do to be responsive to my end consumer and yet be profitable. The third element of it is the whole data lake, the IoT, the big data, the smart learning, machine learning, everything that you hear out there. But keep one thing in mind, that ultimately when we are building cars, we're building a cognitive platform for that intelligent mobility. The last one is, the last but not least, is risk management. I'm going to keep the 5th point away for a minute. It's all about risk management, because by the time you send something, take it from me that it's obsolete. So you want to be able to get the real-time information from across the edge and be able to act on it. But the most important point is not the process, it's not the technology, it's not the data. To me, it's all of us, the human workforce, the empowerment of human workforce in the automotive extended supply chain who can make the right decision with the right data that would help move the top line up, keep the bottom lines down, and help grow the companies profitably. So basically growing the gross margins out there. Quick introduction, I'm Srini Muthusrinivasan. A name so nice, my parents named me twice, so call me Srini. I lead the manufacturing strategies for JDA, the leader in supply chain planning and execution as called for by Gartner, the only leader out there in all 5 quadrants of the JDA's, the Gartner's Magic Quadrant, in 5 different areas, be it warehouse management, transportation management, sales and operations planning, or integrated business planning, as some of you might call, supply chain systems of record, or sales and operations execution, the last one being assortment management. Hey, thank you for the opportunity. Welcome any questions. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Srini. I think you put down there really some of the mega trends and shifts and changes that we're going to be discussing and hearing a lot about throughout this conference, and I think give us some good food for thought there to kick off this session. As I mentioned, we want the rest of the session now to really be an engaged dialogue across our panel and hopefully with you as well. So we'll move into questions. Experience tells me that you're shy to start, so I'll just kick off. This session is called Designing Future Supply Chains Today. So we want to be forward-looking, but for a moment I want to talk about the today bit, just to kind of ground us and put us in context, because despite a bit of a decline in sales, we're still in a 17 million SAR, and North American assembly is about as high as it's been in any recent memory. So when I talk to a lot of tier suppliers or logistics managers, it seems that number one headache for them today is just getting material going and finding the capacity wherever they can get it, however they can get it. So can you just kind of, maybe we'll start with Magna, if you don't mind. Talk a bit about what some of your challenges are today in 2017, and what you sort of need and want to see improved in logistics, and from there we can kind of talk about the future a bit as well.
Well, there's no lack of challenges in our state of affairs and our business. I think for logisticians, at least, let's move back a second. I'm part of a purchasing organization within Magna, so the emphasis is on optimization, cost savings, and the like. And so when we look out forwardly to our future supply chain, logistics has a vested interest in that. So logistics is part of our Global Sourcing Council decisions. We have a vote in how we plan and source our products on a global scale. The problem that we're wrestling with is the decisions and the knowledge that we gain through those sourcing decisions, which have an SOP life of, let's say, 2 or 3 years out. That knowledge is not easily transported or lost when it comes time to actually build that product. And so we're constantly reinventing or trying to understand why we decided to do the things that we decided on several years ago. So that knowledge transfer, that database of information is one that we're challenged with, and we're trying to figure out how to sort that out today.
Thank you. Amy?
So from my perspective, one of the age-old problems I think many of us grapple with daily in the logistics world, and this tier one suppliers especially, is matching up our actual ship quantities to the volumes that are coming at us via our forecasts. And while we look at your model, Srini, of the automated and digitalized supply chain, it points out ever more so the need to have clarity and commonality across the understanding of the requirements and the true end customer needs, so that our supply chain is leveled out and we are not spending inordinate amounts of money on premium transportation. So I think that's one of our big challenges. Visibility remains a challenge for us. Just tracking our inbound shipments, understanding where they are in the world. We hear a lot and talk a lot about proactive versus reactive. And at this point, I feel like we still are really in a reactive mode a lot of the time. And, with all the information sources and the technology out there, the goal, of course, is to shift to more and more proactive management of the supply chain. But of course, in large companies with many divisions, I'm sure Magna's the same way, it's not that simple to just move forward with visibility like you would think. So it's a couple of our challenges.
Jeff, from Toyota's perspective?
Yeah, I think from our standpoint and like other OEMs, I think, we're always trying to be flexible for the end consumer, right? I think Brandon talked a little bit about the product changing and as the car market evolves, and then with Srini talking about the personalization, how can we be flexible to build in as much shortest amount of lead time, but to be able to respond to those fluctuations as quickly as possible so we're not sitting on a bunch of inventory. And we realize that kind of works its way back through the tier ones and the tier twos, and how do you build those flexible systems that don't cost you a lot of money, right? But be able to recognize the information and be able to respond to changes within that. So it kind of gets back to the analytical understanding of where your changes are happening, and then how soon can you recognize that to be able to respond and still meet the lead time expected by your customer. So I think, definitely the flexibility standpoint is a big challenge for us. Cost is always a driver, right? We're all in it to try to make money and have a business end of it, right? But as those margins shrink and those things change, as other customers come in, then we have to always be conscious of the logistics costs and the things that systems costs and everything else that go in with that. So anyway.
So it seems like, I'm going to let you respond in a second, Srini.
Well, I think they summarized it pretty well. The only thing that I would like to add is, speaking of visibility, it has been a hot topic for more than 10 years, and that translated from near real-time visibility to real-time visibility. But where I see with the digital supply chains coming along is from a proactive resolution. We've come a long way to predictive resolution, or prescriptive resolution, where the people who owns the supply chain can understand the risks and take a set of corrective actions. But now we're moving into the realms of cognitive corrective actions, where the systems can autocorrect and adjust itself before even the planners of the world, or buyers of the world, or the procurers of the world are even aware of such incidences happening. And I'm working in the past 18 years in the automotive industry. I see a lot of players, especially the tier suppliers, are embracing those kinds of technologies and to put them into the supply chains.
Okay. So interesting. I mean, obviously, I think the challenges highlighted across the panel there concern this sort of data visibility and planning, whether it's internally, as Carl kind of referred to, in terms of dealing with the changes in the engineering changes and integrating them into the supply chain, or the visibility of the supply chain in real time and managing that. Srini's implying that systems are kind of the answer here in a way in terms of integrate. Maybe not. I mean,
it is a part of it, but like I said, the first thing comes with people. It is people need to have a mindset change to start embracing, bring in the change management, embrace innovation. And innovation today is disruptive, and inertia holds back. And sometimes I personally would say ignorance trivializes what is out there in front of you, or trivializes the unknown, trivializes the facts. So technology is in fact a great element. Technology can drive and lead the process change, which used to be pretty different in the past. Right, 10 years ago I would have said process needs to come first, followed by technology. But today technology is far ahead that can help people make the change. But at the end of the day, it's the people and the empowerment of people by the organization which is going to matter the most.
Anybody want to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of us would agree is finding that good talent now, right, is always a challenge, right? We all struggle to market ourselves and try to be the attractive employer of choice for this next generation, right? And those of us that have been in the auto industry for quite a long time, right, it's never been that way. It's always been people knocking on your door that, hey, I want to come to work for you. But I think that's kind of shifted, and these thinkers and these innovators that are, bringing themselves to the table. How do you gain that talent, right? And how do you say, okay, we're the one that we, want to attract you to come in and join us to help us lead the change, right? So, absolutely.
Yeah, and from just to kind of add to that too. So I've said at this conference and a number of forums over the years where there's a lot of talk, laughter maybe regarding millennials and the challenges they can bring to the workplace, et cetera, et cetera. And I think, one of the things they bring is a natural curiosity. They ask why. And that's, it's so critical to create a culture of innovation. You have to be constantly challenging the processes that are in place, the technology that exists. The things that made sense 10 years ago maybe don't make sense, in today's world. And they become so common and expected in our industry as well, that you need to ask why. And if you're not constantly asking why, then you're falling behind, really. And so I think in our large organizations, that's something we need to embrace within the millennials and see as an asset and encourage that type of thinking, because that will be the path for, innovative really a culture of innovation and a hotbed for new ideas. So.
Maybe just one more point, and it kind of remind me, you know, Toyota's gone through a culture change, a new location, right? And one of the taglines that we have is challenging the status quo. And kind of going back to the disruptors of the industry, we want those internally, not externally, right? You know, so we want that new thinking internally so that we can take advantage of that.
Give the millennials a chance to ask why. Just remember, that's the emoticon that kind of goes like that, so then that's how you understand it. Srini referred to, like, it kind of starts with the people and before maybe the systems. When I look at the panels here, I see a company like Magna, huge global company, quite decentralized in many ways. So maybe not so easy to pull that together at a regional, global, integrated level. Toyota has obviously come together now in Plano, perhaps in an effort to become one Toyota. And Bosch, of course, also such a huge supplier across many different. So, I mean, these organizational changes, whether maybe it doesn't matter what you call it, reporting lines or not, but efforts to really work more, not just talk about the transport lane here to there, but sit in the room with the engineers, sit in the room with R&D, sit in the room with purchasing and sales and bring that together better.
Yeah, I think that's the advantage that, you know, we're really trying to grasp now. I think all of our divisions are, you know, we were kind of more segmented, I guess, for lack of a better word, right across the country. And I think, you know, and some of the other guests that are here, but, you know, we're really learning from each other as well, right? We're trying to take a proactive approach, learning from externally, but there's so many things that we do differently internally that, you know, some are good, some are better, right? And, you know, our culture has always been about continuous improvement and trying to, you know, recognize that change and get ahead of that. So I think we're really trying to be more competitive and more cost conscious by working together internally as well. So.
Yeah, I would have to say, with respect to Magna, the decentralized nature hobbles our ability to talk to each other systemically, but it doesn't hobble our ability to come together as a bunch of professionals. So, for example, at Magna, we've just had our third annual logistics packaging conference, which brings together logistics leaders from all the groups across Magna to share common practices and success stories. Equally, we have a steering committee that we represent that does the same thing at a higher level. So innovation sometimes comes with working with people outside your immediate scope. And we bring in everyone into these logistics challenges. We bring in our 4PLs, 3PLs, suppliers, carriers, the like, to try to creatively work on solutions where they might not be the key person, but the creative mind works much better when you've got a group of people that come to what appears to them to be a non-related thing from a different perspective. So. We're challenging our 4PLs to be more entrenched, work in areas outside of their current mandated contractual commit, let's say, to Magna, to drive some of that creative juices and those innovative ideas. Yeah.
And I mean, you know, so for us at Bosch, innovation is really, it's a heritage we're very proud of, and it's not just a marketing thing we kind of throw out. Innovation has really worked into how the company functions, and due to that, you know, we have many different forums and global events where we bring together cross-functional representatives from everywhere. And you know, we do have many of the collaboration activities like the steering committees and things like that. But you know, we also have hackathons where we actually invite people to come in and join teams. And I mean, it takes a significant portion of time, you know, to actually participate in these activities. But you know, I actually have people here in the room who have submitted ideas and are progressing through kind of like a Shark Tank internally, where we take those ideas and we promote them, and management funds them, and we turn them into real solutions that are applied, you know, within Bosch and maybe even hopefully elsewhere. So there's a very good culture for innovation and collaboration internally within Bosch, and I think everyone at Bosch is pretty proud of that.
Srini, as a technology company, do you see the automotive industry, logistics industry, moving more into this startup mentality, this sort of hackathon? I mean, or is that, I'm hearing the words more, but is the innovation filtering through? How does it compare to maybe other industries in that regard?
To be very honest, I'm seeing the pace of innovation relatively slower in the automotive industry in comparison to the high-tech and semiconductor world. I mean, where automotive industry today, in terms of trying to bring in those disruptive changes, is what I have personally seen some of the high-tech companies and semiconductor companies driving those changes 10 years ago. Now, the pace of change that I'm seeing in the automotive world and the CPG world is almost very similar, because if I talk to 3PLs, the 3PLs will always talk about taking more responsibilities today in the automotive world, bringing in accessorization, dealerization, where I can bring that last mile change. If I speak to a CPG world, they would just say, I need to be able to deliver fresh foods into the market in 24 to 48-hour time period, which is why I use the word temporal compression, because that time is shrinking. The expectation on service levels and the time it takes to provide that service level is shrinking. And on the other hand, you're trying to trade that off with profitability, cost controls, etc. So there is innovation. The automotive industry is taking it very seriously, because if you're not, somebody else is going to be doing it on your behalf. But we need to go from a transactional partnership to more of a joint, from design to doorstep collaboration, right? So you can't always be, I'm speaking to a tier supplier, and here's the volume or contractual volume or capacities that I'm going to work with you. And if there are differences, you pay for the excess or the ones that you haven't used. But it's got to go way beyond that. Multi-tier, N-tier collaboration is a must on both sides, on the dealer side as well as on the supplying side. And that does not necessarily mean it's a volume-based collaboration. It's got to be all the way from design to the doorstep.
Thank you. Do you want to add something?
So just to kind of add on to that, Bosch has a corporate partnership with Michigan State University and their supply chain group, and we're working on research initiatives, and one of the things we touch on and participate in is the concept of value chain. And so looking at traditionally the supply chain, when I say four walls, figuratively, you're looking at your supply chain, your raw materials, to your final distribution to your customers, perhaps, right? But from a collective standpoint, if you look all the way to both ends of a complete supply chain, that's where the concept of value chain integration comes in. And that's what, Michigan State is kind of applying that mentality to look at the things that are taking place across boundaries, instead of product solutions, multi-corporate collaboration, not just in, hey, send your parts from here to here, but yes, from design, from design to customer end use and everything in between. So it's a concept that's under development, and we're proud to participate in that type of research. But I think it is critical to start thinking from that perspective, given what's before us in the digital transformation.
Thank you. I want to open up a bit to the audience here. If you have a question, just put your hand up, say your name and company, or again, if you're shy, you can put it to the app. And do we have any questions, or you're all just enjoying the show? Well, that's all right. I'm sure you'll click awake at some point.
I think there's one here.
Oh, I'm sorry. Right here in the front. Do you love those awkward pauses?
Scott Krebs from...
Not yet. Try it again. I think it should be on.
Right now?
There we are.
Scott Krebs from Orvis Corporation. One thing we heard in the beginning session from Michael when he was talking about his running was around having goals, specific goals out there, and people rallying around that. So I know we're talking about a lot of different generalities here, but Jeff, you mentioned challenges around talent, right? Amy, you mentioned around proactive management and the costs that are associated with not being proactive. And then Carl, you were talking about, hey, help us from historical standpoint, we made some decisions. Why did we make those? You know, people move out of different roles and stuff like that. One thing that Orbis has seen, and a lot of different suppliers similar to us, so we do packaging, is how do we leverage ourselves to become those talents that you need, those people that you need, so it isn't just your teams, right? How do we leverage the whole supply chain? How do people within the supply chain help each other from a history standpoint? So if we have people that are around longer and we go through model builds and we have information that we can hold and store, we want to collaboratively share that with you. A couple comments from you guys. How can specifically, so people can rally around those goals, can you come up with one specific challenge that you guys need help on that your supply chain can help with?
Well, yeah, I mean, I mentioned visibility. So to me, I saw earlier many of you raised your cards and said, yes, we need to be more innovative. So again, coming back to the visibility and the tracking and the tracing, in 2017, you can take your phone and you can look at, someone's house in India, right, from a satellite image. But you can't find out where your material is without tracking through 20 different systems and calling your LSP. So there's a level of investment in the technology that we need and expect our providers to buy into and to start upgrading and getting into the digital age with us. I think it's critical that those types of investments are made. Because with the technology that's available, some of the LSPs and how they're tracking and tracing today is very manual, very, again, reactive versus proactive. We could really use the help and the visibility out there in the market with the technology that I know exists to help us improve what we're doing, in terms of our transportation management within Bosch.
I guess I would respond to that a little bit. Again, getting back to the cost factor. I think we have a lot of talented people with Toyota, but we also recognize that our suppliers have much more, right? And the partnership there. And so, we don't always make the best business decisions. And I guess the example I would use is with the packaging side. Sometimes we would over-engineer packaging, and sometimes we'd under-engineer packaging, right? So, again, maybe that's not our exact expertise. So anytime that you see those type of things, please help us. Please help us understand what, based on, I think Carl was talking about the sourcing decision 2 or 3 years ago, or something like that, then things are such changing. So we have to be dynamic and flexible to be able to not have those costs be a hindrance to us for such a long time. So anything that you guys can help us in the OEMs with from a cost reduction, a cost containment standpoint, then we're always open to that.
So be super innovative, but make sure the price is right? Do we have any other questions? Here, right over in the corner. We have a second mic coming.
Hi, my name is Joe Llewellyn from Atlas Copco. So one of the things that I've always heard the triangle, good, fast, and cheap. So I wanted to ask the panel how you guys kind of lead those different discussions of those decisions on good versus fast versus cheap and finding that balance so that it's not just pick two, but possibly getting all three.
I can take it. I'm a software provider, so at the end of the day, our customers look at it good. We need a good software, we need a fast software, fast solving software, and a cheap software, right? At the end of the day, from a software provider who enables digital supply chain, the cost of it is driven by the value, the ROI. So what problems we solve, whether it's a top line growth or predominantly a bottom line impact. So cheap is a very, I would say, a very loosely used term. If it's a good quality, it solves a specific problem. It has a huge impact on the top line, on the bottom line, helps grow profitability in as fast as possible. So your net present value or the ROI is seen within that 6 to 9 months period on an average. But that's how I would say it, right? I would like to hear this, what cheap means, because that could mean to different, expensive rather, could mean different things for different people. right? And it also depends on the nature of the business. You may not need a Cadillac when your company is small, but again, you have to keep in mind as companies grow and with mergers and acquisitions, problems becomes too large. So the traditional mistakes that people think is you buy a software that is cheap, but if you start looking at the total landed costing, the total landed cost of feeding that elephant over that extended period of time, you might as well make the right decision buying the right quality tools and software, right? I'm purely talking about from a software perspective, technology perspective. I'll have you comment from the actual practitioners in the industry.
Yeah, Joe, I think I would just add, and I think Srini hit on it, I think all three are important, so I think you have to peel back each one and really define within each of those categories what's a must, right, and what's the driver. And so I think you can get all three, but not all the components of all three. And so you got to be able to understand where you're willing to give, right, and what you can live with, and basically to make the project successful. So you got to spend that time defining it in either the scope of work or whatever, how you're going to measure the success of the project.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else want a question? We have another right up front here. Can we have a mic right in the front? I need to get staff that can leap over tables, I think.
Hi, I'm Bridget Graywell from Magna International. I have kind of a contemporary question. With all the disasters that are going on right now, it seems like the tier ones are taking both the brunt from the supply chain and the brunt from the OEMs. And we're kind of stuck in the middle. And we haven't budgeted for it, we're not going to get paid for it. And so every time there's something going on that sends us out of our norm, we end up getting a big price tag with the payments that we have to make. How are you dealing with that, and what do you think the answer to the future is going to be?
Is that an OEM question or a tier one question?
Yeah, Jeff, we'd love to hear how you're dealing with that. No, I mean, we share in your pain, as I'm sure many in the room do as well. So yeah, it's definitely something we'd love to hear.
Yeah, I think we're all not planning for those abnormal, but they almost seem to be normal, I guess, urgent issues anymore. And as you're doing your long-term, mid-term planning, then you're trying to build into your profitability structures and stuff like that. Then, I think it's always in our world, and I'm not the expert on it, but we are in the crisis management side of it. But the commercial side of it is more on the purchasing and procurement side in our Toyota world. So I think we're always open to that cost sharing, and I think that's up to our procurement side and purchasing side to be able to understand the condition and the healthiness of the tier one or the tier two or the tier three. So I think we value that partnership obviously very strongly, and we need you to be successful for us to be successful. So I think that's an open conversation that we would embrace.
And if in doubt, blame purchasing. I think that's usually a good.
Yeah. Yeah.
If okay, regardless of whether it's a specific hurricanes, but we've had plenty of examples over the years. Would you say your organizations are getting better at managing these kinds of things? I think that tells us everything.
I would like to say yes. Yes, I think in general we're getting better. It's always difficult to predict, obviously, exactly how you'll be impacted, but in general, I think the contingency planning, the partnership with the providers, and what they're willing to do, and this last hurricane we had. Individuals whose power was out, their homes were threatened, and they were, still made available to us, which I think is well over the top and obviously much appreciated because we do depend on them. But, it's that kind of collaboration which has really helped us get better, I think.
Oh yeah, 100% agree. I mean, I think we see some extraordinary stories of people despite personal interruptions that go to make sure that we can, maintain fluidity or maintain production and stuff like. So we certainly appreciate it. We recognize that. I guess practice makes perfect a little bit, right? But you really don't want to get that good at those kind of things, right? So.
And I mean, if we went back 6-7 years to maybe specifically for Toyota at the moment, when you think about Fukushima and you think about some of that, what that threw up, it was these gaps that no one would have necessarily predicted. Okay, 4 plants are shut in North America because of some small chemical supplier who was knocked out at the tier 3 level, which supplies the entire world. Have you, from Toyota perspective, and then maybe the tier 1s, have you worked to improve that sort of knowledge and visibility through your tier supply chain, perhaps in collaboration with the tier 1s, for example?
Yes, I think we have, and I guess I would ask the tier 1s to kind of elaborate on that. But we have a lot more visibility to that network, right? And the risk and the lead times, and as she said, the contingency planning and stuff like that. So it's kind of built into our process, kind of your point, right? You have to have flexible processes in some regards, but what are your risks, and then what is your mitigation plans? And I think we've all had to become stronger with that. So,
yeah. And supply chain risk management overall has been a hot topic, but it is now being implemented by a lot of companies. And the difference there is risk management was always seen as a long-term directional goal. Like, for example, I use the term integrated business planning. People look forward out, especially in this industry, you look forward 5 years out, start planning your risks and start putting your plan Bs and Cs together. But to your specific example of hurricanes or floods, what the high-tech company does is they take the same paradigms and put that into 0 to 3 weeks and 0 to 3 months time frame. So it's the same process, same principle, but your planning horizon is shorter and the planning frequency is almost far more frequent than how it used to be traditionally in the automotive supply chain. So people are embracing it, and I wouldn't necessarily say the pace of it is slow, but it is definitely happening today.
Any other questions? We have one right in the middle here.
Hello, my name is Brandon Volson from Alpha Root Systems. And I guess my question is, and I'm the packaging engineer for Alpha Root Systems, and one of our major concerns is container management from the logistics side. And being a packaging engineer, and when you're short on containers, you don't have enough containers for your loop days or your logistic cycle. I can buy packaging all day, but if we continue to lose containers and not track them, then that's the issue that we'll keep running into. So my question is, if there is a container management idea that may work, how do you bridge that gap internally and with your tier 2 or 3 suppliers to bridge that gap in order to execute your container management initiative?
It's a big rush to answer.
yeah, I guess from the OEM perspective, I think like many of you here, whether it be tier 2 or tier 3 or tier 1, we're all worried about where our containers are in some basis, right? Like you said, so we have to get that visualization improved, and I know we're working with some partners to try to understand what's the best way to do that. Again, I have spent some time at the tier 1, and I know the issue is really the same. Where's our packaging? I was always signing off on requisitions for more packaging and that kind of thing, which maybe for the Orbis side of things is good in the packaging people. But, I think, it's just visualization and the technology, I think, is what we're trying to learn. And those aren't new issues, I don't think. It's just a matter of the containers being, I guess, maybe more common as much as possible, and to try to limit the risk and the loss of those as well. And then, how do you continue to not have that be such a cost driver for yourself? So I don't know if that answers your question directly, but, we're always wanting to visualize that supply chain both on the inbound side and on the outbound side for containers, and then understand where that is for us, and then how do we need to adjust that.
Does anybody? I wonder, I may ask, it might be better to throw the question back to Bridget, knowing Ed Magna's expertise on this. If you want to defer, I think there had been some specific initiatives at Magna to do more in this area and improve the container tracking visibility. Do you want to maybe speak to that slightly? Bring a mic up here front.
I don't know if you guys heard, but a couple weeks ago there was a $2 million worth of FCA containers that were stolen by a truck driver. He sold the resin for $400,000 or something like that. They caught him. So this is going directly to the tracking situation and what we're trying to do. We tried RFID. It really didn't suit our circumstances, because once it's lost, and you can't actually bring it back. So now we're looking at GPS tracking, which was expensive, and we weren't able to use it before, but now they have low energy Bluetooth technology. But I think your question was, okay, I found the beacon that I want to use. Now how do I relate that internally to my logistics group and say, these are expensive pieces of equipment that I have on this truck. I want you to track those trucks. I want you to make sure that the truck driver doesn't take the containers and the beacon away and use it somewhere else. So with within Magna, we're really tight because we have that steering committee. So we're really tight, so we have communication constantly with the transportation side. What we're doing right now is just saying that when we come up with an idea of what we need to do, then you guys need to implement the best that you can. And they run with it and go as far as they can. They're going to need your expertise to be able to actually fine-tune the beacons and the tracking mechanisms and things like that. But they're already tracking trucks. With Ford Motor Company, what we've decided to do in Mexico is, instead of them providing transportation to get the empty containers back to our location, we've taken that on ourselves, another cost that we didn't project. But if we don't do that, we are going to lose all of our containers. So transportation had to cooperate and had to get lanes for us, even though they weren't planned. We said, this is how we're going to do this until this smuggling, or whatever you want to call it, for the containers is taken care of, and we get everything traceable. So that's what we're doing.
Thank you, Bridget.
And one,
Yep.
just to comment quickly on Bosch and, again, some of the innovative things that we do internally. We have sensors, as many of you know, that do all kinds of things, not just automotive applications. And, talk about Internet of Things and connected applications, embedding sensors in packaging is kind of an initiative that we've taken on. And if you go on YouTube, if you're interested in learning more about that, there are some videos if you search Bosch Logistics, which you can view, that describe some of the sensor technology we're putting into packaging.
Is that something that would be interesting to Toyota? Have you considered that? I'm not sure if that's maybe not part of your particular area. But.
Sorry, I'm more on the operations side.
Yeah.
I know we have some logistics
Yeah.
planners, and I know we are working on packaging technology, but I'm not as up to speed as some of those options, I guess, if you will. But obviously, anything to save money and understand where our supply chain is on the returnable side, we're well interested in that. So.
One of the things that was certainly raised by Amy and others on the visibility side, when we talk about the potential that we carry around in our pockets, but not necessarily in our business right now. I've been to some manufacturers which are starting to, or logistics providers as well, kind of control towers, rooms with nice big maps feeding in real-time information tied to an ERP or MRP system with inventory and all that. I mean, it does take an investment, I'm sure, but is this something that a Bosch or a Magna or Toyota is looking towards, or are you actually looking more towards your 3PLs, for example, to take that kind of control tower view? And then maybe Srini, you can give a perspective as well.
Yeah, at Magna, in our case, we've decided in North America that aligning with our 4PLs provides the best return on investment for us, as opposed to building anything in-house. So the answer to your question is, we rely almost exclusively on our 4PLs to deliver the real-time visibility online tracking systems that we need for all our inbound supply in North America. And integrating that data, though, into our internal systems to provide feeds is something that we do not do. So we see it, but we have to, it's not real-time connected to our internal manufacturing operating systems.
Right.
And Carl made a good comment there. A lot of companies do now have visibility, but integrating that and taking an actionable next step on what happens when something goes off the task, right? Be it a port strike or be it a hurricane, a ship is stuck there, the inbounds are late. The need in the industry is to be able to take a corrective action. Of course, a corrective action will come at a cost, and it is okay to pay the cost to keeping the end goals in mind. It's going to bite you somewhere, but in the longer run, it's not going to chew you apart. But that's the gap. It's not just probably magnets. Probably I've sensed this across several customers of ours coming to us and saying, that's a problem, we would like to have it fixed.
Yeah.
And Bosch is taking a much more active role in their supply chain, than they have in the past. And so we'll definitely, be relying on LSPs and providers as we always have. But, one of the things that I think is critical to the business is data, understanding your own transportation, how you're moving things around the world, and therefore how you can do that more efficiently. So the data piece is something that is, of increasing importance to us, and we'll be taking measures to, bring more of that central intelligence in-house.
Yeah, I would just add from the Toyota standpoint, I think, we're still in study mode on some of those options, and again, we value the partnership with the LPs as well as the suppliers, and I think Brandon hit on it again this morning, is how open are you sharing data, right? We all have data, right? That how does that align with each other to make the best business decisions, and where's the best cost mitigation at, right? And if that's at the LP, if it's at the supplier, I think we're, still in the study mode for a lot of those things as well.
So, by and large, these potentials to do the things that we want seems to be there, but it's the integration piece to a certain extent as well. But are there other kind of things to get it into real time? I hear debated sometimes, maybe needing to switch from EDI to API and something more that what, we see on an e-commerce business doing, for example, or retail. If the consumer was demanding that visibility the way an Amazon customer demands it, would we really see the change happen? Maybe Srini.
No, that is so true, and I'm sensing more of this in the CPG world than in the automotive industry. Like I said, the automotive could become your single largest, most expensive consumer electronic product, and tomorrow I wouldn't be surprised if a consumer is asking for a minute-by-minute update of where your product is. This has been well resolved in the consumer electronic space. It's not a problem of integration, it's actually a problem of vertical integration of all the stakeholders that are in a given supply chain. Now, of course, there is elements of technology to it, but I'm talking purely from a process standpoint. Vertical integration is a key to bring in that level of real-time visibility. And if you don't have, like I said, when you're sensing something is wrong, today's world, many times, it's an obsolete information. You need to be able to predict where the risks are going to be so you can take those corrective actions. I hope I answered your question there.
Yeah, I think, again, I kind of have been in the industry for such a long time, it's really hard for me to fathom that the person purchasing that vehicle really wants to know the mom and pop shop all the way back that's making that little bracket, right, But, I think we touched on a little bit earlier from the natural disasters or interruptions or something like that, it just amazes me how far back you have to get to understand the risk, right?
And people are tracking their iPhones today, and tomorrow if car is going to be a digital platform where people can configure anything and everything of their choice, the apps that's going to go into it, then people at one point, I wouldn't be surprised if they aren't interested in knowing when their components are going to be coming in, when their finished good, that is a car, a fully dressed car, is going to show at their doorstep.
Some food for thought there. Maybe any last questions from the audience before we move to lunch?
In the back.
Right in the back.
Jeff Loster from ZF. Srini, this question's for you. You've talked a lot about CPG industry and high tech. Can you talk more about the amount that they invest in R&D and more specifically in their supply chain innovation?
All right, great question, Jeff. And the only reason I'm trying to bring a CPG or a high-tech into an automotive audience is only because I've personally seen the velocity of change that is happening in this industry is a little higher than where I'm sensing in the automotive industry. And again, this is segmented, not a generic, general statement. There are areas, there are automotive companies like Toyota, Bosch, there is speed in some of the businesses. Now, to your question, I forgot the question. Where do I see the R&D spend? It differs by industry to industry. For example, if I'm taking high tech, and let me split that into consumer electronics and semiconductors. Consumer electronics live in a very short-lived product life cycle. So their investment is back to concept to cash. When something is produced, the product life cycle, which used to be 2 years, is now sometimes 6 months. So I need to capitalize on a thought process and innovation, a design that you have got. You need to go and invest, create that level of transparency with all the upstream players who's going to come together, fully assemble it, and get it to the market. So there is a bit of distribution excellence as well, and to turn it profitable. That's one thing. If I'm talking semiconductors, the problems are very different because there's yield factors. For every wafers that I come up with, there's probably 80% of the wafers are usable. Now, if I don't play the market right and go back to segmentation, if for some reason I have, to simplify the terms, let's say you have 3 qualities of wafers, the chips that you have made, A, B, and C, A being the highest quality, C being the lowest quality. If for some reason you do not have enough inventory of C left on hand, you're forced to fulfill that given customer orders with B's and C's, where B's and E's will be yielding a higher margin. So there is an inherent need to invest more and understand how do you right-size the inventory through segmentation. So that's an example. If I'm talking about CPG, again, CPG has durables, and there are several sub-verticals there as well. Their innovation today, like I said before, is all around the last mile distribution, because those products are changing, and many a times you will notice when I say a product goes from SKU 1 to SKU 2, we don't use the term SKU in an automotive world, we use parts, but in their world they use the term SKU, and when a product goes from SKU 1, let's say, to SKU 2, many a times the actual product is still the same, it might just be the packaging. So there again, their investment goes a long way in vertically integrating that with contract manufacturers, co-manufacturers, co-packers, and getting the product on hand, because they have another problem, date-sensitive inventory, that we in this industrial automotive world do not always see, except for batteries. There was an example brought up this morning. So there are different areas of the innovation and R&D spend. And collectively, across manufacturing industry, I would say, almost everyone is investing or have a vision to invest in digitalizing the supply chain, which is all around track and trace, real-time visibility, and take one step forward. What do you do with that information? And how can you make your supply chain nimble enough to keep 2 things in mind, responsiveness, traded off against profitability. I hope I answered your question, Jeff.
Okay, thank you. I think we're going to break to lunch in a moment. I just want to thank the panel. I want everyone to give the panel a round of applause, because I thought there was some great insights and discussion there. It is as often in these cases that we end up raising more questions than we answer, but I think that's sort of the point. In our next session after lunch, we're going to stay split. This room is going to be think tanks, as we call them. So you're going to have a chance to break up into smaller subject areas, including on tier suppliers, including on packaging, so including some of the areas we've been kind of touching on. And we're going to be discussing a couple of forward-looking topics to do with those. So that's this room. And then in the room next door is actually a special kind of student forum. We'll have some university students who come in. And as Louis mentioned in session 1, we're going to talk a bit about career options in this sector and what we need to do, I guess, to keep young talent, keep the millennials who want to ask the questions, in this sector. I'd like to just ask you all to log onto the app at the moment, as we want to just get a quick poll from you about our panel. Like I said, we're doing this after every session so that we can hear your point of view about how you rate each session, so it'll help us do our planning. So again, in the app, there's a button, or rather there's a section that says vote. So you just click on the vote, and that will take you to the polling. And in there, you got 2 questions, and we just ask you to quickly vote on those. We're not going to reveal the scores for those, but your opinion really does matter a lot to us. And then as a little preview, later today, we're going to do live polling, as I mentioned, which we will show the results for. So please do take a moment to do that. We really do value the feedback and appreciate that. I'd like you to join us now for lunch. It's hosted by Landstar. And this is going to be back towards the exhibition area, so you can follow the signs back. Thank you again to our panel. Thank you for your questions, and enjoy your lunch.
Thank you, Chris.
Good job.